Okay, Madam Clerk? Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the August meeting of the Rehoboth Beach Board of Adjustment. My name is Jerry Capone. I'm the chairman of the board. We do have a quorum today. I see Walt Cassell is with us to my right, Barry Brandt, Jan Conacy, I'm here. We are missing one member today. Randy Mason has a personal reason for not being able to attend, so he's excused. I point out before we begin that in order to get a variance, you need 3 votes from the Board of Adjustment. So if there are 4 members today, in order to have a variance be granted, 3 members have to vote in favor of the variance. This afternoon, the board has 2 variance cases on the calendar, and we have some housekeeping matters to attend to. Our 2 variance cases are both area variance cases, and the rules for considering an area variance are set out for us by the Delaware Supreme Court. There are 4 factors that the Supreme Court tells us we need to consider. The first is the nature of the zone where the property lies. The second is the character and use of the immediate vicinity. The third is whether the removal of the restriction on the applicant's property would seriously affect the neighboring properties and their uses. And fourth, whether failure to remove the restriction would create an exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the owner's efforts to make normal improvements to the property. This standard is satisfied only when the difficulties alleged by the owner are practical rather than theoretical and exceptional rather than routine. We're going to take the cases out of order this afternoon. We're going to go ahead with the 78 Columbia Avenue case, and then we'll move on to 80 Oak. We don't, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise an issue that it's not a conflict, but I belong to an organization. I just wanted to say that at the beginning of the meeting.
Which organization?
Save Our Lakes.
Okay.
And Save Our Lakes, I'm sorry. Save Our Lakes takes an interest in the health of the 3 lakes in eastern Sussex County, Lake Gerard, Silver Lake, and Lake Comegys. And I'm a board member of that organization, but it does not impact my ability to make a good decision about the cases before us.
So, in other words, you've considered whether or not you should recuse yourself in this case. And
I did consider it, and it doesn't really have anything to do with anything that we're involved in.
All right, we don't have a court reporter today. Everyone who chooses to speak will be required to give their testimony under oath. And because we don't have a court report, I'm going to ask you to keep your voices up, speak directly into the microphones. Everything's being recorded here. And if we need a transcript to be developed after the hearing, the court reporter will be looking at the tape of this hearing and preparing her transcript based on that. Mr. Townsend is going to be administering oaths. Everyone who speaks to us today will have to be sworn and testify under oath. Okay, so let's go ahead with 78 Columbia. And if you folks wouldn't mind coming down to the table over here. So is that gentleman with you with the?
He's with us, yes.
Pull up a seat.
Thank you.
Okay, so would you mind introducing yourselves?
Sure. My name's Pamela Biordi, my son-in-law, Wade Carter, and my husband, Michael Biordi.
Good afternoon. Okay. Madam Clerk, have we gotten any general correspondence in regards to this case?
No general correspondence, but there is correspondence specific to the cases.
Okay, and that's included in our packages? Yeah, thank you. Have we had a chance to review the minutes? I have.
Yes.
Yes.
So is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the
Second?
minutes.
I'll second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the minutes are approved. Any old business? Madam Clerk? No. Okay, the new business is the new case. So why don't we go ahead with the building inspector's report? Mr. Janis?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to you. Before you today is 0522-06, 78 Columbia Avenue. Michael and Pamela Biordi of 78 Columbia Avenue here in Rehoboth Beach. The applicant seeks relief from the following: 270-26 side yards and a related code section to 270-42 structures in required yard areas. The applicants, Michael and Pamela Biordi, owners of 78 Columbia Avenue in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, 19971, are seeking variances to 270-26 side yards and 270-42 structures in required yard areas to allow the placement of a flagstone patio and French drain type system to address water infiltration issues occurring in the crawl space area. The property is located at 76 Columbia Avenue, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, 19971, and is situated in the R1 residential district. The property is listed in Sussex County records as tax map number 334-14.13-153.00. The property is an irregularly shaped lot of approximately 7,783 square feet. Background information. The newly built structure was completed in October 2021. The applicant has since been noting ongoing water issues that have been present during periods with heavy rains. The property abuts Central Park. The proposed construction is located on the south of the property and consists of a total of approximately 225 additional square feet. 112.5 of those square feet of the additional coverage is proposed to be placed beyond the side setback. The encroachment is approximately 15 feet by 15 feet and would remain within property boundaries. The additional lot coverage brings the total lot coverage to 2,826 square feet, which does not create any additional lot coverage concerns. The coverage percentage increases from 33% to 36%, which remains below the maximum allowable lot coverage of 40%. Variance requested. The applicant is seeking relief from the following ordinances: 270-26 side yards. A, 2 side yards shall be provided on every lot as prescribed in the following table. For the R1 district, which this property is located in, 6-foot minimum on one side and 16-foot minimum total aggregate. This one is a little stranger because of the layout, and we can discuss that if you have questions. The placement of any material that is not a grass plant or natural mulch is considered structure and must be placed inside of the setback requirements. The proposed construction violates this section by encroaching plus or minus 15 feet in the required 11.7 yard setback as shown by the provided plan. The applicant would need a variance to allow the construction to proceed. 270-42 structures in required yard areas. No structure and no part of a structure shall be erected within or shall project into the required yard area except A, cornices, eaves, gutters, chimneys, steps, or entries projecting from the main structure no more than 24 inches, and B, fences and screens subject to the provisions of 270-43. The proposed stone paver patio is considered a structure and must be constructed within the required setback areas. Since this proposal shows a patio that lies beyond the restriction line, a variance to this section is required. The conclusion is that the proposed patio addition requires variances to allow the placement. Should the board grant the approval, the applicants shall obtain the necessary building permits to proceed with the construction and follow all requirements determined by building and licensing. Thank you.
The applicants, your turn to make a presentation. Like to make a presentation?
Well, yes. So I'd like to thank,
Would you-
And at this point, we did get your introduction, but if you would indicate your address, I think we all know what it is, but for the record, indicate your address, and I'm going to administer the oath.
sure. So I'm Pamela Biordi at 78 Columbia Avenue, Rehoboth Beach.
Okay. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may proceed.
Okay, so I just want to thank the panel and the board for allowing us to present the variance request. He pretty much summed up everything that I was going to say, so now I have to like figure out where I start. But along with everything Matt said, we are going to add additional landscaping that is a buffer that will allow the water, hold the water, to reduce the runoff impact of any surrounding areas. The plantings will be above the surface level, not enhancing any obstructions or views. So we are happy to be in Rehoboth. We've only been here 9 months, but we feel like it's home. And we hope that we can get our variance to allow us to enjoy the outside.
All right, then I think it's the time for some questions. I have a couple of questions for you. So your application indicates that you have a water damage problem, entry problem.
Yes.
And if we could refer to the plot plan that you presented to us.
Obviously, that makes sense, right?
Do you have a copy in front of you?
I don't, but I have a plot plan. Will that work? The original plot plan somewhere?
We can make a copy available to you.
Okay. I do, but I don't. Oh, I got it. Okay. Well, I got it. Okay, sorry.
All right. So I can see from this plot plan that your property boundaries are pretty much a triangle in shape, right?
Correct.
And the house fits into the right side of the lot there. And it looks like the improvements that you seek to make are in the long side of the property where it abuts the city park. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And I see, it appears to me that you want to build a square patio.
Yes.
And that's coming down from some outside steps.
Yes.
And there's some mention that you have water problem. Could you show me on the plot plan where in the house the water entry is?
So the water came in where the steps are, along that side, and then where it turns to where you could see the downstairs basement entry. Mainly, it's on the side where the steps are.
This is the steps?
Is that where the patio?
The basement steps, correct?
The basement steps.
Well, it goes
yeah.
from the porch steps around to the basement.
We're going to have to go one at a time.
Sorry.
Okay? So the basement steps?
The basement steps and the steps going, so if you're looking at the house where it says steps right there in black, the darker black, 4 steps going down. On the side of that is the water coming in.
Okay.
And then it turns at the corner. So in that small area, where it says basement entry, like along that wall and the wall where the smaller steps are,
All right. Now, is that a basement or crawl space you have there?
crawl space.
And those steps, where the dark letters say steps, looks like there's 3 steps. I presume that those are going up into the house?
Yes,
And the steps, the basement entry, steps are going down.
correct.
So you have a basement and crawl space, is that?
Well, it's the crawl space, but it allows you to go, have an access out.
Okay. So are you able to determine whether the water is coming in under the door from the basement steps to the crawl space?
No, it's not, it's coming in on the wall where the smaller steps are.
Okay. And how do you, so is this improvement, the patio you seek to put in there, how do you envision that's going to correct the water problem?
So, can they talk in that
So if
respect?
you'd like to introduce someone else to answer that question, please introduce that person.
Sure. So my son-in-law Wade and my husband Michael, I don't know who wants to.
So you'll need to speak into the microphone, excuse me. And your name is Wade. Could you give us your full name for the record, please?
Wade Carter is my last name.
All right, and an address for you?
I reside at 2101 North Grant Avenue, Wilmington, Delaware.
Very good. So do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, continue.
All right. So our thought is two things. One, putting in a similar French drain type system to alleviate the water that does infiltrate right at the foundation, but then also putting the patio in at a nominal grade allows the water to, move away from the foundation, but also infiltrate as it proceeds out from the foundation. So it's going to be permeable. It's not a solid surface like a concrete or anything like that, but the permeable surface with gaps in between the flagstone paving. So the thought is, one, moving the water away from the foundation will prevent it from stacking up right there at the foundation, moving it away in hopes to prevent that infiltration right at the foundation, so.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
I have a series of questions. This one's just more of logistics and paperwork. From the paperwork in the application, you said 50% encroachment on the side setback. I couldn't tell whether it was a 15 by 15 patio or a 30 by 30. I think it's a 15 by 15, correct? Okay. Is the house still under warranty from the builder?
Yes.
Okay, has the builder tried to alleviate the problem with technical, the tar on the,
Yes, at the time, there was water, we saw the water, and, after we moved in, there was, it's when it's a certain type of rain. That didn't, he took care of that, he said he did. But after that, it continued to come in. We did have a really bad, winter, so it may be, I didn't live in Rehoboth, but it may be an unusual rain. But he pretty much, felt like
that he refuses to come back
he
and,
never refused, but he did not come back.
Okay.
And we've let, in other areas, we've left messages and they've not been returned.
so you do not know whether they put a foundation sealer around when they were installing?
Say your name.
Okay.
Mike Biordi, 78 Columbia Avenue, Rehoboth, Delaware.
Sir, do you,
Yes,
so-
he did
do you,
post
sir,
So he
sir,
did.
do you solemnly swear that,
I do.
or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Okay.
I was there doing the whole construction every day. They did put a
And can we pull the microphone a little bit closer?
Sorry. And you're on the board, so you know all about construction. So when they put that black piping around the inside of the foundation, it's plastic. And they sort of put it underneath the sand base, and then they pour concrete on it. But when you step on it several times to get out of the hole to mix some concrete, you sink it. And I was explaining to someone, asked me, do I ever get water in my sump hole? And I said, no. Which leads me to believe that my 4-inch French drain that goes around my house is not working. Short of cutting up my whole basement and fixing that, I thought I'd put the French drain outside and capture it first.
Okay. All right. Have you attempted to put, downspout piping out to the property lines to
Yes,
shed it?
that is done.
You have done that? Okay. And, from looking at the property from the park, the land does slope away, so I'm kind of in agreement with you. This land slopes, it's not like they put it towards the house.
I did that. I
Towards
did
the
that
house.
myself.
Okay. And I think that's it for my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's okay.
Go ahead, Walt.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I have some questions. When you're in process of building your home, did you ever do a subsurface exploration test where they actually bore down to check the groundwater? And, yeah,
I could answer that. 90% of the ground that's around the house and around the neighbor's house, a foot below or 2 foot below is clay. Not dirt, it's clay.
Okay, because what they do is they actually do boring and they see where their seasonal flow is, and I didn't know, I'm just trying to figure
I
out
don't
where
think
this
anybody in
water is
Sussex
coming
County
from.
does that, but I could be mistaken.
And it's usually done to prevent water getting in basement and things like that, and to give a report of how far you can go down. How deep is that basement?
6?
So it's not a crawl space, it's more of a basement.
Correct.
They don't call it a basement because it's.
You'll need to speak into the microphone, please.
Sorry. They don't call it a basement because, I don't
Well,
remember.
we
the
know it's
basement.
6'6" now.
Yeah,
okay?
we understand, but it's, I picture a crawl space
Okay.
area. You can actually walk down there and stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to look at the pictures and I couldn't tell, it looked more than a crawl space in my eyes,
Yeah.
a crawl space. And I couldn't tell if that was drywall or concrete going around there. Do you have any perimeter drains or crocs in the basement?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any perimeter drains that go around in a
Yes,
crock? And that drain isn't inside your basement? That's not
Inside.
catching it and going into the drain?
Correct. Goes into the sump hole.
So then how's the water getting onto the concrete floor in the pictures?
Well, it comes through the wall.
No, but
Goes
if you had
down
the
the wall.
perimeter drain on the inside, it usually goes in that drain, it goes to a crock pot.
There is no water seepage around the concrete and the basement floor.
If it goes down the wall,
It's going to run right out on the slab.
it's gonna go down to the wall to the slab. Between the wall and the slab, is there
There is
perimeter
no
drain?
niche. There is
That's what
no
I was
niche.
asking, not the French, the perimeter drain.
Correct.
And
There's no
typically
niche around
that's
the
done,
basement.
and it goes into a crock pot, and then takes care of your water
There's
issue.
no niche.
That's what I was just wondering. Okay.
I think that's typical. They usually put like foam or the black stuff around the border. They usually put styrofoam or some type of material around on the inside. It acts as two things. One is the drain to help alleviate water from the wall, but poured concrete walls don't really fail that often. And they use that for also leveling their concrete, of which they didn't do. So when it comes down the wall, if it infiltrates through the wall, it's going to run down the wall and lay on the slab.
I understand,
come
but
out.
there's, and typically in poured concrete also, you could see perimeter drains where they go around the perimeter to catch that.
There is no
That's
perimeter.
why I couldn't
I'm
tell by
sorry.
the pictures. That's okay. Have you consulted with a good landscape architect or someone who specializes in drainage to evaluate the water issues, to see if you can get a drainage system in there or installing flow wells, for example? Who's saying doing this deck or extending out into the setback will correct the problem that you're having?
Can I speak?
Yeah.
So when
I have
we
no idea what that means.
went in to get the variance and talked to Matt, we explained the whole problem, and before we got the variance, we weren't aware that you can't start your drainage or your, what are we putting,
French drain.
the French drain. We thought, well, we panicked a little bit. So was in construction and started to do the French drain. And then we realized that we have to get a variance, so we went in and mentioned to Matt, could we finish it because we have no idea what the rains are going to be like going forward, and he allowed us to do that. And we haven't had any water since, even with, so with the, you know, we didn't do any patio, but with what he
But fixed
did, it alleviated.
The question then I have is, so the French drain has been installed and the water has stopped. So now we were here to discuss, okay, so you answered my questions about the drainage. So now the question, I guess, is whether we allow a patio.
Correct.
You know, and so the French
Because
drain
now
is
that
almost out of
everything
it.
has been disrupted and, you know, then you're looking at, well, why don't we don't have any outside seating at all to put a patio in, except
So
right there.
the obvious question I have to state is, I know this won't look pretty, but, you know, a triangular patio.
So if you looked at the lot, I mean, the plan, you wouldn't have a place to put a table.
Right.
Because our lot is so odd that.
Yeah, seen the plan, right.
To just give us that little.
Okay.
Okay,
Because that was my question. I wasn't sure whether we were asking for two variances or one for the French drain, one for the patio. So the French drain is already in, and it's alleviated the water problem. So now you're just asking for a second variance, or for, I guess it's not a variance anymore because it's already there.
no, for the, they want
No,
to put a
no,
patio.
I know. You're only asking for the patio now, because the French drain, which was in the original, was two, a French drain and a
Well, I don't
patio.
think
Well, the
that- I
French
don't
drain's
think
already
you-
there, so.
Right. Sorry.
So we're
don't
asking.
think-
Wait, wait. People are talking over each other, okay? I'm going to let our member go ahead and ask the question. and
So
if
we're
you-
just asking for one for the patio now. Correct. Is that right? Is that Matt?
So here's the issue.
I just,
Let me
go
try
ahead.
to straighten this out. When we read this, at least when I read it, I thought that you were trying to fix a drainage problem. And you were trying to fix it in two different ways, with a drain and with a patio. Now I understand, based upon what your testimony has been, that you installed the drain and have solved the drainage problem. And now you have this patio that you want to put in that no longer affects the patio. It may be aesthetically pleasing, it may be make your backyard more attractive and usable, and that's why you want to put this patio in. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Do I have to have a permit to put a French drain in my house?
Excuse me?
The short answer is yes.
Okay.
Okay?
Could we ask a follow-up question,
Sure.
Mr. Janis? Do they need a variance to legalize the French drain?
Unless it was beyond setbacks, beyond property lines, no, they would not need a variance for that construction.
But this is beyond the setbacks.
As constructed, they would not need that variance. They're going for a patio variance, which is beyond the setback lines.
So they do not need a variance to legalize the French drain, which is addressing the drainage problem.
Correct.
So what we're here for today is whether we grant a variance to allow you to build a patio that extends into the setback. The patio does not affect the drainage. All right, are there any other questions from any board members? Is there anybody here from the public who wants to make a comment about this case? No? Anything else you want to say?
Yeah.
No.
could I just finish my question? So when you were building your house, when you laid out the house and everything, I mean, and you, I guess, presumed that you wanted to cook out in the backyard and all, didn't, you can't build a house in Rehoboth without understanding setbacks and natural area and all that stuff. So wasn't that of concern that, you know, you weren't going to be able to put in a patio because you would have to go in the setbacks?
At that time, so much was going on, and we had a lot of issues with our next-door neighbor, and it really wasn't a thought. All we really wanted to do is, like, settle in and get, it just wasn't on that
Okay,
thought list.
Okay.
all right, thank you.
Did I understand you to say you were having problems with the neighbor?
Well, not us particular, the builder and the neighbor were not getting along, and there was friction there. I mean, we're friends with the neighbor. She sent a letter in, accepting that but
Okay.
the builder and her weren't getting along.
All right, so let's just talk about the letters that we received about this case today. We did get one from Elizabeth Trey, 64 Henlopen Avenue, who writes in support of your variance request. Then we have a letter from Deborah Hughes at 74 Columbia Avenue. I guess is she your
My neighbor.
adjacent neighbor? And she also asks us to approve the variance request for you to put a patio there. So those are the only two letters that I see. Are you aware of any other letters on your behalf?
They're the only two neighbors that we met.
Well, there's another neighbor here, and I guess the the neighbor that shares the longest boundary with you is the city of Wilmington, city of Rehoboth Beach, right? And is there any opposition from the city of Rehoboth Beach?
There is not opposition from the city of Rehoboth Beach. We neither support nor oppose it, but we're ambivalent.
Okay.
Jerry, I don't have the map with me, but how far would the patio be from the boundary of Central Park?
Did you do it?
You can look at it, I highlighted it. You want to take a look at it?
Calculation? That's what she wants to know. No, she wants to know how much that distance.
Okay, so it's almost touching Central Park.
Look, I would say it
What's
looks
on
like
my-
about 3 feet from Central Park.
I think that's your setback.
Yes.
From the boundary line to the southern corner, of your patio.
Small triangle.
Yes.
Yeah, is that correct, Matt?
It's roughly about 2 to 3 feet.
2 to 3 feet from Central Park. That's awfully close.
Well, it is awful close, and if this was any other case, I would say it's too close. But because one of the ways to look at this is we're looking at a big parkland, which is pretty much virgin forest as far as I can see. There's no tables, picnic areas, recreation facilities in that park. It's just open land. So it's not like they're encroaching on areas of the city that other people are going to be in close contact with.
Actually, Jerry, we walk the dogs when they're here. We use that park. I'm sorry, we use that park frequently, and lots of people do. You see kids riding their bikes through. You see moms with small children there. It's a used park.
We're not anywhere near the walking trail.
Okay. Is there anything else to add to this case today? No. Well, now it's time for us to decide. All right. So let's kick it around. Anybody have any insights that they'd like to share or feelings about this case?
We learned that the water problem was alleviated. I walked through the park. I mean, it is wooded, I won't say forest, but it's wooded. You can barely see their property. I'm just kind of torn on making a motion. The application does say, aesthetics, and I have a hard time making a motion based on aesthetics. So I understand the need, and what I'm weighing in my head is quick check number 4. So I'm still thinking it over.
I can tell you from my perspective, had this been probably any other property in the city, I would be inclined to vote against this because it's the parkland, and in my sense of the park, it's pretty open, desolate area. So that might make me decide in your favor, but it's a very close call. Anybody else have any feelings on this?
I was trying to figure out the hardship. That's why my
Well,
questions
so
were
we're
there.
talking about, instead of hardship, exceptional.
Exceptional practical
difficulty.
difficulty, and I don't know, it's hard for me to see that. Especially since it's been alleviated, and also, I think Jan brought up a good point with when the house was planned out. I mean, that was the opportunity to look at that.
Right. Jan, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I'm happy to see they're looking at pervious. Are they going down 12 inches? But other than that, I have the same difficulties. I lived there, right up near there, and I do use the park. And you don't picnic in the park, but lots of people use it. And
So is there a motion? The motion could be for or against the variance. You can't make the motion.
No, I know, but am I allowed to say
And well, we've
anything?
already closed the conversation on this. Eventually, somebody's going to have to make a motion.
You want to make a motion?
Go ahead and make it.
All
I'm
right,
just-
I don't know how I'm going to vote on my motion, but I'm going to make a motion to deny the application as the water problem was alleviated with the already completed proposed drains, and the fact that, you know, an aesthetic need, to go against the code is just, I'm kind of torn on that. My vote on this will be again, on the exceptional practical difficulty for the homeowner in, having a patio at the rear of their house. So I'm going to make a motion to deny it.
For a second?
Well, I'll second it.
So now, folks, it's time to vote. So I'm going to ask you to vote, and please state the reasons for your vote. And I'm going to start with Walt. Right, okay?
May I add one thing? So because this is a motion to deny, if the motion fails, then we're going to need another motion, because a denied motion to deny, or a failed motion to deny, is equivalent to like a non-action.
Got it.
And you'll need an action.
Okay.
So Walt,
I'm going to vote against it.
so you're in favor of denying the motion?
Denying, yeah, denying.
So that's an affirmative vote for the motion to deny, I think. Is that right? Is that what your intent is?
Yes.
And then can you?
Yeah, to Barry's point, I mean, I think the issue has been alleviated. That's why I was asking some of those other questions, was to see if they did everything, their due diligence, or if they got someone involved. So, and I just don't see the exceptional practical difficulty with this.
Jan?
I vote to deny, and I don't see an exceptional practical difficulty. They have a very large lot.
Right, so Jan, you voted affirmative to deny the motion, to deny the variance.
Yes.
Right, yes. Barry?
Right, I'm going to go against my motion, same as Walt. I do see an exceptional practical difficulty here for the patio. So I am, how do I say this, rejecting I'm voting, like Walt said, I'm voting against my motion to allow them to have the variance.
I'm going to vote against the motion as well, and only because this is, that backs onto the parkland, and the city has not taken a position for or against this variance. So right now, we're 2 people in favor of denying the variance, and 2 people voted against that motion. So you don't have a decision, you don't have a variance yet. Counsel, you want to give us some instruction on this?
Well, as I said before, you're now in a position where you need another motion. You need another motion. You need to vote, you need to at least attempt to vote something down before we can declare the application is denied by the board, or vote, of course, in favor of a motion to grant the variance, in which case
That might be
your
the easiest thing to do.
responsibility.
If we can get a motion to grant the variance, and then we'll see where we fall on that. Is there a motion to grant the
Could I
variance?
just ask Matt a question? Could I, a point? Is it all right to ask Matt a question?
Okay.
Can they have a smaller patio and not require a variance?
That's not what they've asked for. I mean, they
I
can
know.
build any size patio that they want,
Okay,
okay?
all right.
Well, the sketch indicates the area of the proposed patio that is within the building envelope. So that's what they would be able to construct without a variance.
All right, let me try a motion this way. I'm going to make a motion to approve the variance based on quick check items number 4. Let me address the other quick checks. Quick check items number 1, 2, and 3, I believe, are completely satisfied with this variance request. Quick check item number 4, I do see an exceptional practical difficulty here, on the need for the patio, for some outdoor space for the homeowners. Cutting it in half, a triangular lot would just, I agree with the homeowners, it would just not be, practical. So I'm going to make a motion to approve the variance.
Second? Come on, folks, somebody give me a second.
I'll second it.
All right, so now, Walt, how are we going to vote on this one?
And what was your reasoning for the exceptional practical difficulty? 'Cause
My reason, I mean.
On the fence with that one.
Right. I mean, it's like splitting hairs for me. It's, picturing the property, picturing the plot plan, asking them to have a very small triangular, cut diagonally in half. I just think that's not practical at all. Knowing the nature of the lands around it, easily supports, 1, 2, and 3. So I do see a exceptional practical difficulty here. For the homeowner. So I'm going to make a motion to approve the variance.
So that was seconded already.
And it was seconded, now Walt's voting.
And what's the city stand on this? Again, there's not one.
They take no
We take no position.
Because I agree with you, Barry, the other three were met, and then there was no opposition of the neighbors. I don't think it's going to change the character of the area. I'll vote for approval.
Okay.
Excuse me?
I'll vote for approval.
All right, Jan?
I'll stay negative. I'll stay no, I don't vote for approval.
Barry?
I'm going to vote for approval.
And I'll vote for approval. Based upon the exceptional practical difficulty issue here, I think that it would be hard for them to enjoy their property in the absence of this patio that they seek to put in. It's a minimal area, and the key factor for me, again, is the fact that the city owns the property behind this house and has taken no position as to whether or not there's merit to this patio or not. I'm familiar with the property behind the house. It is big woodlands, so therefore I'm voting in favor of the variance. However, had this been any other location in the city, I, in all likelihood, would have voted against it. So the motion for the variance carries 3-1. Congratulations, and enjoy your new patio.
Thank you. Thank you, Board.
Well, that was close.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
Mr. Forston and Mr. Linehan, I presume, right?
Actually, I am Richard
Forston, I know
Forston, and with me is Tom Gaynor.
Get Tom Gaynor, okay. Good afternoon. Welcome to the hearing today. Let's see, where do we go from here? Building inspector.
Would you like my report again, sir? This has been, it's been a lengthy one. Before you is case 0322-03 from 80 Oak Avenue. Stephen Linehan is listed as the owner as well as 80 Oak Avenue there. Tom Gaynor, excuse me. Applicant seeks relief from the following: 270-25 rear yards and 270-42 structures and required yard areas. The applicant, I guess Tom Gaynor and Mr. Stephen Linehan, owner of 80 Oak Avenue, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, 19971, is seeking variances to 270-25 rear yards and 270-42 structures in required yard areas. The variances are being sought to address water runoff issues that are potentially the result of a combination of ongoing improvement projects of the neighboring properties that collectively contribute to ongoing stormwater drainage issues in the area. The applicant is seeking to construct a riprap structure that would be integrated with improvements on the adjacent property and through the city park to improve the flow of concentrated stormwaters and move them to the existing stormwater collection area. The property is located at 80 Oak Avenue and is situated in the R1S Special Residential District. The property is listed in Sussex County records as tax map number 334-14.13-285.00 and is approximately 0.40 acres. The rear of the property abuts Lake Gerard and is located within the AE 9-foot and X flood zones. Background information. In March of 2021, code enforcement was notified that construction was occurring at a portion of 80 Oak Avenue along the shoreline of Lake Gerard. Upon investigation, enforcement officer Howard Rothstein noted a retaining wall was built along the property boundary and in the vicinity of water's edge, and backfill had been brought in and placed behind the construction. A stop work order was placed on the property and construction was halted. The retaining wall and backfill altered the contours of Lake Gerard's bank. Exhibit A is a site plan submitted as a requirement for a permit application for the construction of pool and pool house completed on the property in April of 2019. The plan shows the existing property line in green and the existing shoreline shown in red prior to the placement of the retaining wall. The shoreline has been modified as a result of the retaining
Excuse me,
wall.
hold on a second, please.
1 second.
I wanted to raise an objection. I didn't know if now was the right time to do that or not.
I believe is it with regard to something that was just represented in the report?
Yes, the report indicates that the line in red is the shoreline as it existed in 2019, and that statement is not correct. I have a representative of the surveying company here who will testify that that is not the shoreline.
Okay, well, your objection is noted. I'm going to let the building inspector continue, and then that'll be an issue to take up in the evidentiary part of the case. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. The line in green and the existing shoreline in red. The shoreline has been modified as a result of the retaining wall and backfill. Variance requested, the applicant is seeking relief from the following ordinances: 270-25 rear yards. A rear yard shall be provided on every lot, the minimum depth of which shall be as prescribed in the following table. And looking at the table, R1S requires a 50-foot rear yard setback. The placement of any material, including a riprap structure that is not a grass plant or natural mulch, is considered structure and therefore violates the 50-foot setback requirement. The riprap structure is proposed to be constructed at the property boundary. 270-42 structures in required yard areas. No structure, which I will define in a moment, and no part of a structure shall be erected within or shall project into the required yard area, except cornices, eaves, gutters, chimneys, steps, or entries projecting from the main structure no more than 24 inches. Fences and screens subject to the provisions of 270-43. Under 274 definitions, structure is defined as the following: anything constructed or erected, including any part thereof, the use of which requires permanent location on the ground or attachment to something having a permanent location on the ground, including but without limiting the generality of the foregoing: house trailers, mobile homes, relocatable homes, signs, swimming pools, swimming pool pumps, filters and equipment, porches, balconies, decks, canopies, fences, backstops for tennis courts, pergolas, gazebos, heating, ventilation, and cooling devices, compressors or pumps and showers, and excluding driveways and sidewalks. The riprap wall scenario is considered a structure as defined above and therefore may not be placed within the rear yard setback without a variance. The conclusion: the applicant is seeking to replace an existing unpermitted retaining wall with a riprap structure that is not allowed in the 50-foot rear yard setback without a variance.
Orson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get started, I just want to have maybe a bit of housekeeping. As the members will recall, we were back before you earlier this year, I guess it was. And there had been a previous application for this very same variance request. And there was a number of materials and items submitted in connection with that variance request. I just want to, I assume and want to make clear that anything we submitted with the prior application is considered part of the record for this application.
Works for me.
Okay. And then, as the chairman and the members will remember, when we had that hearing, you all suggested, and it turns out I think it was a good suggestion, I'll explain why in a minute, that asked us to look into a possible global solution, because even though we need the wall to prevent erosion, and we're still going to need the wall to prevent erosion into the lake, there are drainage issues in this part of the city that have been ongoing for some time. We engaged Mr. Tim Metzner, who is a landscape architect, registered landscape architect. He is here and is going to testify in a moment, to see if we couldn't develop a plan that would alleviate this drainage problem that our neighbor, Mr. Brawlier, was having once and for all. And so working with Mr. Metzner and working with Mr. Janis and the city, we have come up with a plan that we believe will alleviate the drainage situation that led to so much hardship for so many, and a lot of your time and a lot of my time. But before I get to presenting that plan, and I will just show it to you, I just want to go through a little bit more background. I mean, you all have mentioned, and you're correct, quick check is the test. Very famous case that you're all well aware of, and that's all we're here for today. We're just asking for a variance for this retaining wall, and we submit that it meets the quick check test. The property is zoned residential. This small retaining wall, and I'll show you some pictures in a minute, is consistent with that zoning. Beyond that, the neighboring properties are either parkland or other residential. So this structure, this retaining wall, which is only about 18 inches or so, is not inconsistent with residential uses or parkland uses. We're going to put that retaining wall, and we have a survey. I've got another copy of it with me here. It's 22 feet at its closest point to the shoreline. And so it's there is separately in your code a provision that says no structure can be within 10 feet of the shoreline. We're well beyond that particular restriction. So just by way of some background, and I say this in part just to refresh people's memories, and because there's been a lot of confusion, I think, about this application, and a lot of untrue things have been said. Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Lenahan bought this property several years ago, and I think they've done a fabulous job restoring it. In fact, they received an award from Town and Cottage for the landscaping efforts that they engaged in, and I've got a copy of the newspaper article about that I'll put into evidence. As part of doing all of that work, of course, they had to submit very detailed plans to the city that involved not just the landscaping, but also stormwater management. And those plans had to ensure that there would be no increased runoff to their neighbors to the west. So that would be the residents who live on 3rd Street, and that includes Dr. Brawlier, and also had to limit the outfall towards the lake, which is where their property naturally drains anyway. And so there are biodetention facilities that catch the water, and it infiltrates in, and swales and whatnot. It's very detailed. And again, Mr. Metzner, who is here, can answer any questions you may have about that drainage plan. The drainage plan was approved by the city. The work was done. It was and then that work was inspected and approved by the city. And as I say, it's a textbook example of what was done. Let me, I think at this point, if I could, show you all some pictures. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Can I hand these up, Fred?
Yeah. These look like sets.
Yes. So what I've just handed up to the board is a set of 11 pictures, although 2 of them are of the same blue heron because there was a blue heron out on Friday and I just thought he was particularly attractive. I like herons. But if we start at the first photo, this photo was taken from the south side of Lake Gerard and through the trees, so you see the lake kind of at the bottom of the photo, and then through the trees, you can see the pool house next to the pool, that's it, and then to a little bit to the right, you can see a little bit of white through some of the trees. That's the main house itself. Middle, slightly left, you see some black railing or black fencing. You don't see a retaining wall in this picture because the vegetation has grown up such that you can't see the retaining wall. But this is the view from the south side of the lake. The larger point about this picture being you just can't see the wall at all. Picture number 2 is the heron that I mentioned. Picture number 3 is another picture of the heron, much closer picture of the heron. I just like the heron. Okay, picture number 4. This is from the city parkland looking up at the pool house. You again see the black wrought iron fencing. This is from the city park. You see the grass is essentially cut, and then it's kind of extra tall, if you will, where the embankment down towards the lake starts. Again, you really don't see any retaining wall. If you go to the next photo, photo number 5, you're getting closer to the 80 Oak property. Again, you can see the black fencing, the wrought iron fencing. You see a tree. Tom, what kind of, just whisper it to me. Rosen fern. That is growing up. Okay, the next picture, now we've moved to the embankment kind of next, and you can now look down and you can see part of the wall. 2 6x6 pieces of the wall are visible from essentially the top of the embankment in the city park. The next photo, which is photo number 7, I've moved even further north, and now I'm looking kind of back towards the retaining wall, and you can see it's an L shape. Until you get really close to it, you can't really see it at all. If you go to photo number 8 now, these next photos, just to put into context what the drainage problem really was, this is a picture of Mr. Brawlier's property. So our property is to the right of this, and you're looking north. The fence at his property line has been taken down. And what you see here is that the rear of Mr. Brawlier's property essentially has a giant basin or depression in it that collects water. And, you know, it's kind of got a little bit of a curve to it here, and the water is sitting there. If we go to photo number 9, you can see that the water is sitting there trapped because it's sitting in a depression or a basin, if you will, that is lower than the city parkland to the immediate south. So I took this photo looking north from the city parkland, and you can see, again, the water is just sitting there with nowhere to go. If you go to the next photo, photo number 10, the 2 previous photos I showed you were taken earlier this year before the vegetation grew up. This photo, number 10, with all the tall grass, is, I'll say, the current condition. So I took this picture last Friday, and, you know, I mean, the depression is still there. There's still water there. It's still kind of marshy, but because of the grass, you can't see all of that. And then photo number 11, I just ended with another photo of the blue heron. So those are some pictures, and I thought it might be helpful if you saw some pictures of what we were looking at. Back in early 2021, so January of 2021, Mr. Brawlier, in an effort to alleviate his drainage problems, working with Mr. Metzner, who is here, dug a pit, basically 3 by 3 by maybe 4 or 5 feet deep. I don't know exactly how deep. And the idea was they were going to fill the pit with stone, and it would kind of act as a infiltration device. So the water would continue flowing from Mr. Brawlier's property towards the park, get to this pit, and then sink into the ground. Problem with that theory is that the water table is too high. And so instead of having water sink into the ground, they actually relieved pressure that was holding water down, and it started coming up. And it started coming up, and because at that time, the city did not want any water flowing onto the parkland.
Could you repeat that? The city did not want what?
Mr. Mester can tell you with more definity than I can, but at the time, the reason they were doing this pit was because the city had indicated to Mr. Brawlier and Mr. Metzner that they did not want water flowing from the Brawlier property across the parkland to the lake.
Gotcha.
So when the water started coming up, which wasn't what they were expecting, they built up the area along the park side of that pit, meaning that all the water got shunted over towards my client's property. That water then started going back towards the lake.
So if you said they built that
That would be
area.
Mr. Brawlier and Mr. Metzner. Yes.
I think you said that, well, the way I heard it was the city built up the area where the water was approaching. No, that's not the way it was.
No, it
Okay.
wasn't the city. It was because it was Mr. Metzner and at his direction, because they knew the city didn't want water coming onto the city parkland. So in order to satisfy that requirement, they kind of built up that area, and the water, as a result, then flowed towards, it'd be east, onto Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Linehan's property, and then continued its trek towards Lake Gerard, which is obviously the draining point for a lot of the properties in this area. That caused erosion on Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Linehan's property. And seeing this erosion and being practical people, and I saw the water when it was coming up. I got there a few days later, but I saw it. It was just a steady stream of water coming up. Being a practical person, practical people, Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Linehan then put up this retaining wall to try to stop the erosion. And then while they're doing that, the city gets wind that there's action going on without a permit, and I'm not going to get into all the fine details of who said what to whom, but ultimately the city said, stop work. You're going to need a variance if you want this. So we stopped work. So actually what you're looking at isn't entirely complete. I mean, it wasn't fully finished and graded and whatnot, but you get the gist of what it was going to look like. And that's what we did. And we had discussions, and ultimately we filed for a variance application, and we were before you. And then, as I say, at the last hearing on the prior application, you asked us to go back and see if we couldn't find a solution. And at that point, working with Mr. Metzner, and this was being paid for by my clients, Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Linehan, and working with the city and Matt and Liz and Glenn, we all sat down and we have submitted, it's in the record to you, the plan that Tim came up with. I have extra copies with me, that actually will create a channel. I mean, the real problem, if you go back and look at those pictures of the water on the Brawlier property, it's sitting essentially in a depression that's lower than everything else around it. So that water just sits there because it has nowhere to go, and because the water table is so high, it doesn't go down into the soil either. So the idea and what this plan provides, and Tim will say it more scientifically and engineeringly than I will, but the idea is to raise up that basin some and to create a channel with riprap that will lead across the parkland into Lake Gerard, so that all the water now that's been flowing down, I mean, Mr. Brawlier's property slopes front to back, so that leads to the rear of his property, and he's also essentially at the bottom of a hill, So he's got his neighbors to the north flowing down to his property. Now, by raising that basin up some and creating a channel for the water to flow, and that channel will be essentially reinforced with riprap, so there won't be erosion, that water will then flow into Lake Gerard. And that should work, and I'm told that by Mr. Brolier, he was coming in to get the permit, I think this past week. I don't know if he got it yet or not, but that was his plan. I think he's engaged a contractor and is prepared to start work on that plan, I'm gonna say any day now. Having said all of that, because the erosion occurred, the soil that was there got washed, a lot of it got washed away. There was erosion towards Lake Gerard, and the soil that's there now is loose and not compacted and not solid. And so again, in talking with Mr. Metzner, he believes, and he'll tell you all when he testifies, that a retaining wall or structure, since it's actually a structure under the code, of some sort is needed. We, again, as part of the global solution we were trying to work out, we sat down with the city and we said, well, okay, if the city doesn't like the wooden wall, okay. They don't like the wooden wall, but we talked about riprap. And we are told by the city that there used to be riprap in this area. And so we agreed that we would replace the wooden structure with riprap, with stone. And that way the soil can be held in place. You know, as you've seen all the vegetation. I mean, the only way you know it's there if you go looking for it now. So as I say, I think we meet all of the tests for, or the test for extraordinary practical difficulty, which is the test, the 4 factors that the Delaware Supreme Court outlined. The nature of the zone, it's residential. The character of the immediate vicinity is residential, and I'll say natural. The effect of the variances on other properties, if this is granted, there are none. Right? I mean, nobody is affected by this. Nobody will even really see it. And the effect of not granting the variance on the property owner will continue to suffer from erosion and stuff like that. Now, Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Linehan's ultimate goal here, and what they haven't finished yet, is the landscaping for their property. And so part of what they intend to do is to plant some trees in this immediate vicinity where the erosion has been occurring. And once those trees take root and start to grow, then you'll have a much better, I think, barrier and prevention of erosion. But that day isn't going to come anytime soon. So here we are. And we ask for your all's blessing. We ask for a variance. We think it meets the quick check test. We also think that because of your all's prodding and prompting, we were able to come up with a solution, not just for my clients, but also for the entire area with the drainage plan that's been created for Mr. Barlier's property. I do have 2 witnesses I want to call. I've got Mr. Metzner here. You've heard me say his name many times now. And I also have Mr. Jim McCulley, who is a wetlands expert. And I have Mr. McCulley here because when I talked about a lot of disinformation being bandied about, part of that disinformation has to do with wetlands, in which Mr. McCulley is an expert. And he will tell you that despite what you may think or may have heard, the Army Corps of Engineers has never exercised wetlands jurisdiction over Lake Gerard. Beg your pardon?
Nothing.
No. He will also tell you that at the time that this work was done in late February, March of 2021, that none of the ground in the immediate vicinity here qualified as wetlands under the applicable federal regulations. So, these accusations, this kind of casualness where people have accused my clients of somehow violating federal law and filling wetlands, absolutely, positively not true. And I could go on. There's been a lot of things said about my clients in connection with this variance that aren't true. At some point in the earlier proceedings, one of the emails you got sent said, why are they cutting down those loblollies? Do they have permits to do that? That's wrong. Those loblolly trees that were on their property along a portion of the bank of Lake Gerard were dying. I mean, they were beyond 45 degrees in terms of leaning into the lake. So we did get a permit from the city, as we're supposed to do, and we had those trees taken down, and we've replaced them. In fact, we've planted dozens of new trees in the area where those loblollies were. So again, people are throwing things out there that are completely untrue. Somebody said, well, gee, maybe these water problems down at the southwestern corner of 80 Oak Avenue are because, you know, if you look at 80 Oak Avenue's water bill, they had a really, really high water bill in the summer of 2020. They're using too much water. Well, the city knows, and if you ask, they'll tell you, that a pipe leading from the main in the street to my client's property broke. And my clients did get a high water bill, and they looked at it and they said, this is crazy. And within a week, they discovered the broken pipe, and they replaced the broken pipe. So there wasn't any excess water usage. And the water, I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask you a question. The date of the pipe breakage, does it coincide with the photographs?
No, the
How far apart were they, the breakage to the date of the photograph?
Which photograph do you mean?
The photograph, Mr. Braulier's property with the excessive flooding in the back?
Is it one of these photographs?
No, it is in the original presentation.
Okay.
Or no, it's in that.
No, it's the ones I took.
Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah, no, it's the ones I took.
I just want to know the dates.
So the date that the water pipe broke was August of 2020, okay? The date that I took those pictures of the water in the swale.
Winter.
Beg your pardon?
Winter, you could see there's no leaves. Okay.
Yeah, but I want to say that was February or March of this year, of 2022. So that's, I mean, this problem hasn't been going away for Mr. Braulier.
Yeah, I thought we saw those photographs in October of 2021, the flooding of Mr. Braulier's property. I'm just trying to get the alignment to the water breakage. The original statement from the building inspector included commentary about the excessive amounts of water. That's what I'm trying to get to. Did that pipe break cause the flooding?
You know, I appreciate that, and I'm actually now, I'm going to stand corrected. I am told by my client that the pipe break actually occurred in August of 2021, and the initial pit and flooding issues occurred in January, February, March of 2021. So the water issue occurred before the pipe broke.
Thank you.
I apologize for not getting that chronology
Gary,
correct.
is it okay to ask him, I got very confused because I thought the variance was for the wall,
It is.
but then you just said that you worked out something where you're going to put rocks and riprap, I thought instead of the wall. Is that not correct, or
Two separate things.
the wall plus rocks and riprap?
Right.
Okay.
The wall is necessary because even with the riprap and channel from Mr. Braulier's property to the lake, which should solve that drainage issue, we're still going to have problems with erosion at Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Linehan's property because of all the damage that already occurred. That soil now is not compacted, it's not hard, it's sitting there loose.
I was confused. I just
Yeah,
wanted
no,
to make sure.
But the solution, the new application is to replace the existing wall with riprap, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, well, I did
That's,
understand
yeah,
that
so you
then.
did understand.
Okay,
I'm
thank
sorry,
you.
so yeah.
We
So,
all-
so the globals, well, there was testimony regarding the fix for the problem on Bralier's property.
Right.
And there's evidence that the city's prepared to approve or has approved a permit to construct that remedy. I think the applicant's position is that they're still going to need some kind of structure to hold the existing soil.
I understood that.
And that it would not be the existing structure, it would be
Rocks.
riprap.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought I understood, but I wasn't sure anymore.
I
So-
apologize for that
No, it's
confusion.
okay.
So I think at this point, rather than listen to me drone on, although I'm happy to answer any questions, why don't I call my two witnesses and we can get that done. So with that, I'd like to call Mr. Tim Metzner. All right, Tim, you're going to need to be sworn by Mr. Townsend.
Tim Metzner of Davis Bone Friedel, 1 Park Avenue, Milford, Delaware.
Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And one quick matter of housekeeping. A number of representations were made by Mr. Forston, representations of fact, and I guess I would ask Mr. Forston to ask you whether,
Adopt this.
yeah, would you affirm or would you find fault with any of those factual representations?
I do want to clarify one particular item. Do you want me to do that now at this point, or do we?
As long as you do
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you brought it up.
Okay, all right. So when I worked with Mr. Bralier to come up with a solution, we did come up with that, the sump area for infiltration. We were not permitted to grade onto the city's property, so that was existing grade right there. So we didn't build up the city's property, so we had to tie into existing. So I do want to clarify that portion.
Can you pull that mic a little closer to you?
Sure.
Okay, so with that, I want to start where I made that initial objection, and so
Should be this thing, I think.
oh, there it is. Fred, can you want me to hand this up to you? Have you all got it? This is, I'm looking at the exhibit to,
Part of our record, we all have that? Does anybody need one in front of them?
If somebody has one, an extra one.
I've got plenty.
I'm sure you do. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Messner, before we get started on actual documents, can I have you describe your qualifications to the board?
Sure. I'm a registered landscape architect in the state of Delaware, associate with Davis Bone Friedel.
And in that role, have you been involved in the development of 80 Oak Avenue?
Yes.
Okay, and so are you generally familiar with both the 80 Oak Avenue property and Mr. Bralier's property?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you what all the members of the board have. It says Exhibit A in red at the top, and in the middle of the drawing, it says tree density calculations. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
Can you tell us what this document is?
It's an existing tree survey that was prepared for the site prior to the original building application for the improvements to this site.
Okay. And there's a line that has been highlighted in green that says existing property line. Is that the existing property line for the property?
Correct, for 80 Oak.
Yeah, and it's only one of the property lines. It's the southern property line, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then there is a line marked in red that says existing shoreline prior to retention wall placement. Is that an accurate description of what that red line is?
No, that red line actually was just where our limit of survey stopped because there were no improvements, proposed improvements that were extending beyond that at the time. So that line was just a limit of survey only.
And just so we're clear then, that line is not the shoreline.
That's correct.
Okay.
So how did that language end up on there?
Mr. Chairman, that red language, that was put there by Mr. Janis as part of his
Okay, so
report.
Mr. Janis put the red line,
He did.
so who made the red line? Who created the red line? You did?
The red line was just black on the original plan because it was just the mark of, end of what they were surveying. Mr. Janis highlighted the property line in green to show you where the property line was, and then he highlighted the other line in red, trying to suggest that the shoreline had moved since 2019.
Okay.
Okay? So that was, now look, I think Mr. Janis just misread what he was looking at. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but it was an error, and I wanted to correct that because it's not accurate.
All right, thank you.
Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you, if I can find it here, yes. This is a smaller version of a document that was introduced at the prior hearing, but I just want to put it in front of us. Fred, can I hand this up to you?
There's multiple copies, if you could pass a couple. Yep.
Okay, I have just handed you a document that is labeled 80 Oak Avenue, Pool Area and Building Rehoboth Beach. And then it says as-built plan, and it is dated August 30th, 2021. Can you tell me what this plan is designed to indicate or show?
So this was prepared upon completion of the improvements, and this shows the as-built conditions for the site. Do you want me to expand or any
Yes.
in this in particular?
Yes.
Okay, so down at the, I'd say the south end, where the corner, where the wall in question is located, we did locate the wall, and then we also located the edge of the water line, as shown at the bottom right corner, which we're calling the ordinary high water mark of elevation 5. So our surveyors located that.
And am I correct then in that the wall is more than 20 feet from the shoreline?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, let's, are you defining shoreline as synonymous with ordinary high water mark?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
That's my understanding of what the shoreline is.
I'm not sure either, but there's a lot of terms in here. Some are terms of art and some are words that we just are used to using in our everyday discussions. But anyway, go
You
ahead.
make an excellent point. Okay, next I just want to go over what you've heard me refer to as the Brawlier Plan. So, Mr. Metzner, can you tell us, I've just handed you what's actually 11 by 17. On the right-hand column, it says 1/3 Street, and then on the lower portion of the plan, on the left side, it says existing condition plan, and on the right side, it says site grading plan. Can you tell us what this plan is?
So this was a drainage plan that we prepared for Mr. Bralier to alleviate the drainage conditions in the rear of his site.
And has this plan been approved by the city?
Yes.
Okay, and earlier I characterized this plan as calling for what I would term a channel that would run from the southern edge of the Brawlier property across and out, across the city park property and into Lake Gerard. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is that channel, I'll say, reinforced with riprap?
Yes, so at the end prior, the goal was to provide positive drainage along the rear of the site, and then to also slow down the drainage at the end prior to it discharging into Lake Gerard to reduce any sediment, also reduce any velocity or any other solids or any other trash or debris that would end up in the Lake Gerard. So that the goal is to put the riprap at the end of that to again alleviate velocity and also any sediment or solids.
And previously, I showed the board pictures that showed water collecting in a depression or basin on the Brawlier property. They were pictures 8 and 9. With this installation of the channel across the city park property and all, will that drainage problem be eliminated?
Yes.
Okay. Turning to the wall itself,
Could I ask him to do me a favor? You do me a favor. If I hand you my map and my red pen, could he mark the channel and the location of it on Mr. Bralier's property for me, and where it's going to end up, where it's going to start, and where it's going to end? Gotcha.
And
I'm going to pass that to my.
do you see where the property lines are? Mr. Chairman, you see where the property lines?
This is the big one here, right? No. Yeah, this is Brolier. Oh, I
Give us a
see.
moment
Okay, I
to publish this.
got it, thank you.
And if, may I explain the design a little bit while you guys
Give
are?
me a minute for him to take a look at it.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So the goal is to match the existing grade along Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Lenahan's property, slope into Mr. Bralier's property so the water doesn't drain directly off site. And then at that point, that's that swale that we highlighted in red there, and that would then direct it toward Lake Gerard. One thing with this area is, as you know, existing condition is coming along that property there. You've got the park coming down, and then you also have Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Lenahan's property all coming to this point. And as we know, that area is filled in with sediment over the years. It's been that way for a long time, that corner. So this would help alleviate any more of that occurring because of the, with the riprap, slowing it down, stopping it before the point of discharge. So that's the goal, that's the purpose of the riprap. It's to slow it down, and that's what's used for Delaware DENREC Erosion and Sediment Control Manual.
You're a witness, but I'm going to have some questions, and let me ask him a question while it's fresh in my mind here. So are you the gentleman, were you involved in damming up that corner of the Bralier property when the city apparently said they don't want water to go across the?
So the goal, yes, I was originally a part of that, and what the goal initially was to discharge it to the lake, and then that plan was essentially not approved, so we had to come up with a separate solution. And the next solution was, if we can't discharge it into the lake, then we'll create an infiltration basin and hopefully successfully have the water infiltrate at that point prior to discharging.
So you dug the pit.
Correct.
And when you dammed up that corner of the property, how high of a dam would you say you?
Well, it wasn't damming up the property. It was existing. It was already in existing condition. So the existing area was a low point in that corner prior to starting any of this work. So that there was no, we didn't dam it up. We actually essentially lowered it by about 6 inches to the top of that.
So the tub existed before you started working there?
Yeah, that was a low point that existed, yes.
Okay. And this pit that you dug, so was it your idea for the pit, or did somebody else give you that idea, come up with the idea?
Well, it was my idea, and then what we're going to do was backfill with the stone to allow the water to infiltrate, get depth, and then infiltrate, just like a French drain, just like that type of
Were you
infiltration piece.
present when the work was being done?
No.
Were reports given to you about what was happening when the work was being done?
After they encountered the water essentially rising almost immediately, I did get a phone call from the contractor at that time and said, this is not going to work. So then we were looking at different options, and then
But
that's when we
at the
stopped.
time the work was being done, you received a phone call contemporaneous with that work. The phone call advised you that, hey, the result is different. We have water coming out of there.
Yeah, we got to come up with a new solution.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, does the dirt that was on there before you started digging, did that act like a cork? Is that what happens, or?
It's hard to tell. We didn't get geotechnical investigations done prior to, so that's where it was.
All right, that's enough of my interrupting. These
No, your questions were exactly right, and I think your analogy, Mr. Chairman, of a cork on a bottle is exactly what happened, because once that dirt was removed, that's when the water started coming up. So obviously, the dirt that was on top was holding that water down, I think. But let me go on with my questions. So this plan should solve the drainage problem for Mr. Brolier and his rear yard. But what about the retaining wall that's there? Will there still be the need for some sort of structure?
Yeah, because we still are going to encounter the same situation of the park draining perpendicular to their property. So as I stated a minute ago, this area has silted in over time, and it's just, this corner has filled in. And it's going to essentially continue to do so unless there's some type of reinforcement that stops that velocity coming perpendicular to his property.
Well, let me ask you about the retaining wall, though, that we're now seeking to build for, or seeking to continue, put in riprap rather than a wooden wall. Is that still going to continue to be necessary?
Yes.
And am I correct that if we took away that wall, then that all that loose dirt and fill that's there right now might easily get washed into the lake?
Yes.
So is it fair to say that that retaining wall is actually benefiting the lake?
It has been, yeah, because it has reduced the amount of erosion that's occurring at that corner.
Okay. Now, we've reviewed and I think we've corrected the error with the red line not being the shoreline, but is it the case that the construction of this retention wall would have caused the shoreline for Lake Gerard to move?
No.
Okay. I don't have any further questions, but certainly I don't want to.
I do.
Go ahead. Right.
Yeah, so who prepared this? Did your firm prepare this?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so your firm prepared this, and this was presented to the city of Rehoboth Beach?
Correct.
To the planning, okay. And, okay, I just wanted to double check, because and you said, I think you said the city approved this?
Correct.
Mr. Jonas, is that the case?
The plan has not been approved to date.
Okay, so it hasn't been approved to date.
It's been submitted for
Submitted but not approved. I just want to
the owner
correct. I just want to understand.
for knowledge.
Well, I want to understand too, because that's contrary to what I've been told, and it's contrary to this June 13, 2022 letter. So my understanding is this plan has been approved, and Mr. Brolier, he just hasn't picked up his building permits yet.
Well, that's just a portion of the plan. So Mr. Janus can't approve a plan. The entire plan here isn't approvable without a variance. That's why we're here today. The portion that Mr. Brolier would like to do does not require any variances. So Mr. Brolier has petitioned for his building permit to do his portion of the work that does not require a variance. And that's the only application we have. Is that correct, Mr. Janus?
That's correct.
So this doesn't require variance. Because what they're presenting, what they gave us.
Mr. Bralier's portion does not. The riprap that's being presented today does require a variance from this board.
And you prepared
is
this.
not approved
You
yet.
prepared this, and I also see removal of wall. Is that the wall now you're saying we should keep?
What, it's reinforcement, some type of reinforcement, but I believe
But it
the
says
case said,
removal, yeah. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Let me, again, try to clarify here, and I now understand the distinction that my friends were making. So just so we're clear, the portion of the project that relates to Mr. Bralier has been approved and is permittable because it doesn't need a variance. We are proposing to remove the wooden wall and replace the wooden wall that you saw the pictures of with riprap, as Ms. Conacy made clear. And so when it says wall to be removed, it's because we're removing the wall, but then we're putting up riprap. So again, I apologize. To my mind, riprap and wall are the same thing. We're just substituting materials, but I can see this is very, I'm getting confused, and I know. I thought I knew a lot about this.
Any other questions? Will?
I have questions to the landscape architect. Who, or to Mr. Forston, who landscaped the north side of the fence where the trees, it says existing tree line in this picture and in evidence number 8. Who did the tree landscaping there?
we did the landscaping for 80 Oak.
Was water collecting along that side of the fence prior to, because I just have a hard time imagining Mr. Bralier installing a fence, wooden post fence submerged underwater. So did you change the grade? The city prevents us from changing grade of our property. Did you change the grade that then, as a result of putting those trees in and beds, send the water over to his side of the fence?
Our proposed plan did not modify the existing grades at the property line.
Okay. Next question, I guess, maybe for Mr. Janis or for you. A drain. Why didn't someone propose a drain?
So we did propose essentially a drain. That was one of the items that we were looking into.
Okay.
But we were going to run into the same thing. There's still a low point right there, and it's going to create a ponding situation. So it'll, although, we did look at, and that was when I got a phone call from the contractor that the sump wasn't going to work. We then looked at, I worked with the contractor, we looked at, well, what if we put in a French drain along the entire rear property line?
Not a French drain. I'm talking about the black plastic tubing out to the lake.
I think
End
the
of problem.
I can answer that question. The city did not want anything underground. So the reason that the channel on the plan is above ground, and it's kind of just a channel, is because the city did not want something.
Is that true?
Regardless of what type of pipe it is still a structure, and
Understood. So here's my next question. The riprap. What's the size of the riprap?
It varies between essentially 3 to 6 inches in diameter or length.
Like boulders?
Well, it's essentially, it's not boulders, they're just larger 3 to 5 inch stones, and that's.
These are not what you would call river jacks. You see rounded edge stones. These are riprap that we see underneath Route 1.
No, not like that.
Okay, please explain.
It's essentially the stone that you see at the end of storm drain pipes. It's very common in storm drains. All stormwater management has a discharge pipe to slow down the velocity. And that's essentially what, if you look at if you look at a pipe discharging into a stormwater management pond, it's that same pipe.
Thank you.
So I have to pick up on Barry. I'm used to, we have property on Moores Lake in Dover, and the riprap that people have is not 2 to 3 inch little rocks. It's big rocks all along the shoreline stacked around and stuff, and I guess some just, so this is not that.
No, that is what it is.
You
It's
said
the
2
bigger.
to 3 inches.
Well, it's said 3 to 5, but it can get up to 6.
Okay.
So it's 3 is the minimum, and then it goes up to 3 to 5 is the standard. but there can be 6 inches. But I mean, this is, when you're talking about that,
Okay.
you want something to stop velocity.
I personally still am not clear why a nice drain grate with a structure underneath to the, and this is to the city and to you and to Mr. Bralier, would not be the best solution here. I haven't heard the answer to that. I think that is my questions, right? Thank you.
Mr. Brain, I will just say in candor, we were advised by the city they would prefer a surface flow rather than a submerged flow. Now, I mean, you're right, and I think the chair may have said it at the prior hearing. There's a million different ways you could engineer this, but this is the solution that I'm going to say we all kind of came to an agreement to.
Okay.
And when you say we, you mean the city as well?
Yes, yes, because we were consulting with the city to come up with this plan. We would not have presented it to anybody if the city didn't say, yes, this is a plan we like, or can support.
And that's actually, Fred, what I was going to, we asked you months ago, I can't remember how long ago, to go back and, talk to all the adjoining property owners, including the city, and come back with a plan. And so I'm assuming that Mr. Brailer has signed off, that the city has signed off, and obviously you have because you're here.
Yeah, Mr. Bralier could not be here today. He did send an email saying that if he hadn't picked, I can't remember if he said he picked up the permit or he was about to pick up the permit, but he's got a contractor lined up to do the work. He's going to do the work. We paid for the plans. Of course, in that same email, he says you shouldn't grant the variance anyway, but that's a different issue. But yeah, so he's aware of this. He intends to pull the permit and pay for the work to be done, the actual construction work. And,
Including on your property?
No. The wall and the stuff on our property is separate. All he's
Okay.
paying
Oh,
for
okay.
is just the channel, I call it the channel, to get from his property to Lake Gerard with the riprap at the end, as Mr. Metzner has.
And Glenn and Matt, is that your understanding also?
Could you just repeat your question one more time for clarity, please?
So we're not trying to be coy about it. So we did meet, and the reason as to the drain pipe, one of the concerns of the city is that we would prefer to not have untreated or unfiltered water going directly into the pond. This riprap will allow the velocity slows down, allows some of the sediment to fall out before it makes it into the pond. So that's one of the reasons that the riprap is probably preferable. As to the plan overall, I mean, as Mr. Forson said, Mr. Bralier has indicated that he's going to go forward with his part of the plan. He has put something on the record indicating that he opposes the variance. The city, and Mr. Janis can correct me, I'll ask you if you agree with this, but the city's position is that we're not opposed. We can't be supportive of a project that is essentially authorized as construction that occurred under circumstances that weren't permitted.
That's correct.
So, Mr. Metzger, it's your opinion that all of the property owners have essentially, if they each fulfill their part, that the problem will be solved?
I do.
Well, including, I believe he's including the owners of 80 Oak.
Yeah.
Yeah, 80
as
Oak
a
and
part of
Mr.
this.
and
Okay,
Dr.
I was-
Broller and the city. If everybody, the
Right.
whole point was, let's get this, let's not be adjudicating a neighborhood fight. Let's get this done correctly. And so, and you believe that, okay.
Let me ask you a question. Let's go back before the hole was dug. The hole was dug to correct the problem, right? I mean, you just don't dig a hole in your backyard, you say,
Correct.
I'm going to dig a hole today. The hole was dug to correct a standing water problem. And you were working for the Mr. Bralier at the time.
Correct.
And what did he tell you about when that standing water problem began and how it began?
So I don't know of the timing of exactly when all of that occurred. But he did say that he was encountering flooding issues. I don't know. I don't know the whole timing. I really don't. I don't know when.
Berlier has a chance to speak if he chooses to.
I know. But in any event, so the water was backed up beforehand, and he asked you, help me solve my flooding problem.
Correct.
And then the hole was dug.
Right.
And that didn't solve the flooding problem.
Right.
But believe that he said, Mr. Brolier said that he didn't have a problem with water until the work was done at 80 Oak. But the fact of the matter is done, and hopefully they've worked it out.
Hopefully they did work it out. Well, let me get to that. So you were nice enough to draw that red line on that site grading plan, right?
Correct.
So if I follow that line down to the bottom, to the riprap, which is on the city property, your line ends at the city property there, right? Why is 80 Oak even implicated at this point? Why do they need riprap on 80 Oak when the red line leads down over the city property, avoids, goes around the corner there, and goes into the lake? So why do they need riprap?
So during extreme storm events, it's this water that's coming from the city's park is going to be coming perpendicular to their property line, or essentially where that area is at. So, this is really only for extreme events. This isn't for, a 2-inch rain or a rain we got today. This is for larger storm event that creates flooding and property damage.
One more question for you on that document. About an inch to the left of where your red line ends, where the intersection of the properties are, the city park, the Bralier property, and your client's property, it looks like riprap in place there. Do you see that?
That's existing.
And that's what I thought it was existing. Existing there for how long?
As long as this survey was done. We don't have anything from.
So the next question would be, do you know who put that riprap there?
I do not.
All right, I don't have any other questions at this time.
I just want to follow up on a question, because I want to make sure I'm clear. The retaining wall that's currently in place is made of wood. We intend to replace it with riprap if the board should grant us a variance. But is it your opinion that removing the retaining wall entirely would be a mistake?
Yes.
And isn't it the case that not only do we need that wall there because of water flow from the park, but also because the soil itself is not compacted and hard and is more likely to erode right now because of the erosion which occurred 2 years ago?
Yeah, so that's correct. Over time, that soil is just very uncompacted, but it's a lot of silt and sediments that have just drained there over time, so it's not very stable.
Okay. All right.
You finished with Mr.
I'm
Nestor?
finished with Mr. Messner unless anybody.
Could I ask a question? Sure. So about the riprap replacement structure, if you will, I mean, is that going to differ in height from what's currently there? You're familiar with what's there.
Mm-hmm. Correct. No, it would match existing to the height of it now, of the what's behind the wall. So we wouldn't be raising it up at any point.
Okay.
It would tie into
And
existing.
then the term erosion has been tossed around a lot, as if we all know exactly what that means. And I think we probably do know what it means, but could you describe it in any more detail? I mean, like what would you see if you were there during an event which you described earlier? What would what would that erosion look like in an extreme circumstance?
So the soils, as the higher velocity rain channels, it will start to create rifts in the soil. So, you know, if you're looking at a bank, all of a sudden you get these little valleys that naturally occur. And as the water channelizes into that, it gets faster and faster, and the water then becomes what is called turbid, which is the sediment-laden water. So it's going to be a brownish color. And that area, that's what the soil is getting conveyed into the water. So now that has little sediment parts that end up at the downstream or collected at one point. In this particular case, this corner has accrued it over so many years that it actually is going out into the lake just because of just naturally this has a channelized area. So this has created that erosion over time, and it allows, or it really pushes the soil to move from typically steeper slopes down to flatter, lower portions of the drainage area.
Mr. Forston, so we've heard from this witness. Could you just give me a preview of your next witness?
I have Jim McCulley, he's a wetlands expert. I just want to clean up the record, and his testimony should be very brief to make clear that no wetlands, I say should be, but who knows. I want to make clear because, you know, in the past and in some of the correspondence and whatnot, there's been insinuations about illegally filling wetlands and whatnot, and I just want him to state on the record why that's not the
I'm going to have
case.
some questions for him, but why don't we take a 10-minute recess, okay? We'll come back in 10 minutes, okay?
Thank you.
Ready? Okay, we're back in session. Mr. Forston?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would like to ask Mr. Jim McCulley some questions, so I know that Fred will need to swear him in.
Jim McCulley, 100 Biddle Avenue, Newark, Delaware.
Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony given this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. McCulley, can you briefly describe your professional qualifications?
I've got a master's degree in biology, and I've been doing wetland delineation and permitting for 37 years, previously with the Corps of Engineers, and since 1990 for my own company.
Okay, and just as an editorial comment, it's my belief that Jim's the best wetlands expert in the state of Delaware. Have you investigated the work that was done at here at Lake Gerard and 80 Oak?
Yes, I have.
And in connection with that work, has the U.S. Army Corps ever said that Lake Gerard and its environs are wetlands subject to federal regulation?
We actually asked the question when I got involved. We asked the question of John Brundage, who was in the Dover office of the Corps of Engineers, and we have correspondence from him that stated April 9th, 2021, and what John says that in 30 years, I can't ever recall having processed an application for Lake Gerard, nor can I find any records in our database suggesting we've ever taken any action or asserted jurisdiction over Lake Gerard.
And in your professional opinion, when the work was done in early 2021, did it affect any wetlands?
No jurisdictional wetlands, no.
And so you're correct to say jurisdictional wetlands. If it did not affect jurisdictional wetlands, was any permit required from the U.S. Army Corps?
No.
Okay, and then just one final question. It's been suggested that perhaps the retaining wall may have caused the shoreline to move. In your opinion, is that a possibility here?
No.
I have nothing further.
What's your goal of saying jurisdictional wetlands? I mean, it's the city's, I mean, just the fact that it's not the Corps of Engineers, it's the city's property, right?
No, it's our property.
Let me interrupt you for a minute,
Okay.
and then let me just go forward. Let's do it this way.
I got it.
Let's look at the photographs. Do you have the stack, the compilation of photographs there?
I got them.
Would you take a look at the first page? Okay. Do you see any wetlands there?
There are wetlands here, yes.
Okay. So the fact that this isn't within anybody's jurisdiction doesn't mean that there's no such thing as wetlands. Certainly, this picture denotes wetlands.
These are existing wetlands, yes. Even after the wall's built, there's still wetlands there.
I understand that. All right.
But that's on city
working here.
property. Oh, okay, sorry.
All right, let's go then to number 4. Do you see any wetlands there
There are some wetlands on the right-hand side of the picture, yes.
on the right-hand side? Let's go to number 6. Do you see any wetlands there?
There are some wetlands in this photo, yes.
And in fact, if we can see this retaining wall, you see the retaining wall here on number 6?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So are there wetlands on the lower, this side of the retaining wall, but not on the other side?
There's a mixture of uplands and wetlands on the closer side of the retaining wall.
But there's no wetlands on the other side of the wall, correct?
Correct.
It's grass. And if you look at picture number 7, you get a better view. You see that there's wetlands on the closer side of the wall, and it looks like there's wetlands on the right-hand side of the intersecting wall.
There may be some, but there's also Queen Anne's lace, there's a lot of Queen Anne's lace growing there, which is an upland species.
Which is what?
Not a non-wetland species, so that doesn't grow in wetlands. But I mean, I can clarify that, you know, I didn't see this area before the fill was placed, so it's impossible for me to say whether wetlands whether they're jurisdictional or not, were filled. And so we've had this discussion with the Corps of Engineers, first with John Brundage, and then later with Todd Horniman. And Todd was investigating whether he thought there were wetlands there or not. We haven't heard anything from him since October of last year, so we assume there wasn't. But the discussion we had was that there's a nationwide permit 18, which is already granted to everyone in the nation to fill 1/10 of an acre of wetlands. And we filled about half of that here. If everything that was filled was wetlands, it would have been about half of that, half of 1/10 of an acre.
That's a jurisdictional definition.
If it was jurisdictional, which we're contending it's not even jurisdictional,
But
so.
we're not talking jurisdictional anymore. So the question for me is, did the erection of this wall impede upon the wetlands of Lake Gerard? Not necessarily jurisdictional, but as they existed. And if you look at these photographs, it seems that it might be the case. Wouldn't you agree?
I think for the most part, I mean, I can see a lot of non-wetlands adjacent to this wall, but I can't say for certain whether there were wetlands underfilled that I didn't see the area before it was filled.
You didn't see it was before it was filled. All right, I don't have any other questions. If you have a question regarding a photograph?
No, it was about the word jurisdiction.
Right. Any other questions for this witness? Walt, anything?
No, I'm good, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Let me see if I can't clarify the difference between, I'll say jurisdictional, I'll use air quotes, and regular wetlands. If something is a jurisdictional wetlands, Jim, what does that mean?
That just means it's under the jurisdiction of the federal government.
And that means that you've got to comply with applicable federal regulations.
Yes, you would have to get permits to impact those wetlands.
And if something is not a jurisdictional wetland, what does that mean?
Then that means you can impact that without any permits from the federal government.
And so far as you know, are there any permits required from the city of Rehoboth?
I don't know.
And are there any permits required from the state of Delaware?
No.
I have nothing further.
Let's go back for a minute to photograph number 2. Photograph 2, we see the blue heron in the middle of the photo, and we see, looking east, there's the Henlopen Hotel, and on the left-hand side is the other bank of Lake Gerard. How would you describe the shoreline there?
On the left-hand side?
Yeah.
Well, it's tough to see. I mean, I assume you're talking about what you can see that's kind of parallel with the bridge as you go to the left of the photo.
This is what I'm referring
Yeah,
to.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it looks like there's probably no or very few wetlands along that edge of the lake there.
It's heavily, would you call it natural vegetative state?
It's got trees there.
It's got trees in it.
Yeah.
Can you see any houses?
No, not in the photo.
Do you even know whether there are any houses behind those trees?
I believe that there are, but you can't tell from this photo.
Okay, I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, those grasses were installed by Sola 3 maybe a dozen years ago, if not longer. They went around all of Lake Gerard to establish, to protect the shoreline, I believe.
Are you talking about this side? This side, there are no houses.
Correct.
Well, they didn't personally install.
Well, you could just, if you're going to, all right.
Okay.
Any other questions? No, any other evidence? Anything?
Mr. Chair, obviously, I
sir.
would like the opportunity, to the extent other people speak, to respond to what other people may have to say.
So-
And I'd like to make a closing statement when we're all done.
So we're going to allow public comment now. Is there anybody here who would like to, I know you would. How about you, ma'am? No? Okay. Interested observer today. All right, welcome. Madam, your turn. Please give us your name, and then the council will swear you.
Of course. Is it on? It doesn't sound like it's on.
Yep, just get real close to it.
My name is Barbara Kittay. My last name is spelled Kittay, and I live at 59 Maryland Avenue.
Ma'am, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. I will say, just to introduce myself, that I am a member of the Bar of the District of Columbia with active status, and I'm a member of the Bar of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania with retired status. At 59 Maryland Avenue is an apartment building with 17 units. 14 of them are owner-occupied. They are not rented. 3 of them are seasonally rented. Very low percentage of rentals, as I understand, for Rehoboth. 11 of those units do directly look over the lower end of Lake Girard. In recent days, maybe not today because there's been a heavy rain, but in recent days, it's clear that the color of the lake has changed. It is a very putrid shade of green, and that there is a very heavy overgrowth of vegetation at the lower end. Let me just say too, that at today's hearing, we seem to be focusing on the dispute between 2 homeowners, not necessarily the concerns of other homeowners in the area, but we've received notice, and that's why I'm here. Several of my neighbors would also prefer to be here, but they're not in town. We're also looking, it appears to me, at today's hearing, at remedies for damage that has already been done to the lower part of the lake, rather than looking back historically at what caused some of this damage to the lower end of the lake. Council has framed their efforts in this engineering study, and by the way, I was present by Zoom at the last hearing, so I understand that this hearing was framed after an effort to see what remedial measures could be taken. But that really does miss the original questions that were raised when this wall was built. Council has left, I guess, us with the impression today that the wall and whatever these rocks will be are an intention to shore up the lakefront, but it was apparent before any of this began that the wall was built to create an access point for the property. Our property is owner-occupied. It is not operated except to a very small degree for profit. Their property is designed for profit. And it appears that that wall was built, a light was constructed there, and a chain was put across the raised portion that was created by the wall that prevented the neighbors, all of us who used to walk around the lake with our dogs and otherwise, from being able to get around that part of the lake. A chain with a no trespassing sign was erected and a light. So it wasn't that the wall was put up to retain the side of the lake bed. The wall was put up to create this sort of egress so that the very well-to-do renters of this property would not have to walk all the way around 3rd Street in order to attend events or eat in town, but could walk across our public park. It's not clear whether it was the park project in the last few years or whether it was the removal of the trees and the root system of their trees that caused this erosion into the lake, but it's clear that the bottom half of Lake Girard that we all look out to is sick. The lake is now sick, and it's not clear to anyone what remedies are being proposed to fix that for us. It may be that this is a dispute between 2 neighbors. We see it as a dispute in our entire neighborhood. The bird is beautiful, but he used to stand in clear water, and I saw him yesterday standing in weeds and crap, and garbage and litter gets stuck in all of those weeds and vegetation, and the color of the lake is putrid. And we want to know how that happened, when the permission was given for the trees and the root systems to all be destroyed around that part of the lake, and what is being proposed to fix that. That's what I came to say.
Let me just comment on some of the things you said. we have limited jurisdiction here. We are here to consider a variance, and that's it. We don't try to remedy the disputes between the neighbors. If it works out that they've solved some of their problems, that's all well and good. But we're only here to determine whether or not they should get a variance for the erection of this riprap wall on the property. You want to say something else?
Yes, but the variance was to bring a structure out closer to the public portion of this land that, in our view, has been, this may be too strong a word, but has been in some fashion appropriated for their purposes and has caused damage to the public land. The fact that we couldn't walk across around the lake at that portion of the lake outside of their fence because a chain was put up across it affected public land because of the actions they took before they sought the variance in the spirit of asking forgiveness rather than permission. And so had they asked for the variance to begin with rather than after they had erected the wall, we would have come forward, maybe we wouldn't have even known how that would have intruded upon our rights to enjoy the lake bed and our rights to look upon a clean lake. And I say clean, I don't mean polluted. I mean just visually, and I don't know, I'm not an environmental expert, I'm a lawyer. I don't know what that vegetation is and whether it's healthy and whether we should tell ourselves it's lovely. It's not lovely. It's not the way the lake looked 2 years ago.
But I think maybe you should understand, I think what I'm going to tell you is right. They have the right, there's a 50-foot setback for structures, but they can plant trees in their backyard. So, I mean, if they want to make changes in terms of vegetation, they're allowed to do that. They don't need a permit for that. So they could grow things back there. They could plant trees if that's what they choose to do. Now, in terms of this walkway you're suggesting was the real reason for this wall. I do note that on the chart that Mr. Metzner marked up for me, it looks like that section of the wall is going to be surrounded by riprap.
So they're still going to get their land in.
Well, I don't necessarily know. I mean, riprap is not something that most people feel comfortable walking over. But
No, I think what they're proposing is that that's going to shore up a platform of dirt, which is what it looks like now. There's dirt with a wall around it, and it's going to support the platform of dirt so that people can walk out the back of their property and onto the park, as opposed to having to go out their front driveway onto Oak Avenue and around 3rd Street and walk all the way
I don't know
around.
what people, I can't say what all people are going to do. Maybe some people are going to do that. I don't know. Maybe that was the reason for
Why there's a light there. They put up a street light on the landing there.
When was the last time you saw the light on? This is the first I've ever heard
I
about
don't think it's
the
ever
light.
been on. I don't think they accomplished what they intended because the city came along and told them they needed a variance.
Well, I appreciate, we all do, the fact that you came into this meeting, and you've been here apparently for 2 meetings, and you've sat through everything. And I wanted to give you every opportunity to say what you wanted to say. So you've had full opportunity, I presume. If not, keep talking.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anybody else from the public here? I think we should note that we did get some correspondence here, and let me locate the correspondence and tell you what that was about. So we got a letter from Mark Purpura, who lives next to Mr. Brolier, and he is in opposition to the variance. His letter is dated October 21st, 2021. And according to his letter, the owners of 80 Oak made drastic, quote, the owners of 80 Oak made drastic changes to the contouring of their rear yard in 2018 that resulted in the elimination of an existing swale, which had long existed that ran from Oak Avenue to Lake Girard. The elimination of that swale, combined with other construction projects in the rear yard at 80 Oak, have altered the natural runoff into Lake Gerard. That's part of what he's.
And that goes in line with my questions earlier, that, but the owner said they did not change that swale. Okay.
And then we got a letter from Marcia Simpson and Robert Raposa, who reside at 76 Oak Avenue. They advise that they are very concerned that the owners of 80 Oak have already damaged Lake Gerard with their infill and other landscaping. They say that the owners of 80 Oak have built a retaining wall on the lake shore, causing runoff and preventing filtration with natural vegetation. We got a letter from James Johnson, 84 Park Avenue, in favor of the variance, and that was dated October 27, 2021. And in his email to us, Mr. Johnson says that he's in favor of this. The owners of the property are good neighbors and have made their property a showcase. They planted more trees than they removed. They deserve a fair, untainted consideration. As far as I know, those are the only three letters we've received. It's two more? So help me out then.
They're on the file on the city, I'm sorry.
So might they, I'd be happy to, but might they be part of the record from our earlier proceedings?
Suzanne Good and Jess Behringer.
All right. So I found that one. That was Mr. Johnson was from the earlier hearing. And I seem to recall that there were letters in favor from.
Jess Behringer and Suzanne Good.
Okay. So I don't have those in front of me, but we can say that you did get other letters of support. Okay.
They are on the portal.
All right. Any other evidence, any other comments? Mr. Forston, you look like you want to say something. I'm not going to stop you. Go ahead.
Well, you know, you give a lawyer a microphone, he's going to take it. I do want to respond to what Ms. Kate said, and I also want to respond to Mr. Papura. His letter, he claims that there was a change to the swale. We have heard from the landscape architect who prepared the plan that there was no change. So, you know, that's why I talk about there's a lot of kind of people think things or they assume things. That's not accurate. With respect to Ms. Kate and people walking around the lake, what people don't appreciate or understand is that the Gaynor property, not down at this end where all the issue is with the drainage, but I'm going to say at the southeastern end of the property, they own all the way to the bank, to Lake Gerard. Their property extends to Lake Gerard itself. And so when people are walking around the lake like they want to do, they are actually walking on Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Linehan's property. I don't think people appreciate that. And in fact, some of the city maps that are out there on the web suggest that that's city land, but it's not. Their fence doesn't go all the way to the edge of their property because of setbacks and things like that. But they actually own that property, and it's within their rights to say, you can't walk across our property. So, I mean, I appreciate that people like walking around a lake. I liked that blue heron. That's why I gave you 2 or 3 pictures of him. But, I mean, that's the deal there.
Are there other property owners that are east that would also suffer or suffers too dramatic a word, but also might have people walking across their property?
I suspect so, but I can't tell you that I've actually looked at their deeds or their property lines. And I think some of the grass that we heard Ms. Kate complaining about is actually some of that grass that the folks at SOLA caused to be installed, but
12 years is.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I agree. I don't know. And as to the point that, oh, this was all being done so you could get an access point from the rear of the 80 Oak Avenue property to the park, that access was already there before the wall was put up. It was the erosion that was being caused by the pit that got dug that led to the need for the retaining wall. So it's not the case that this is part of some dastardly scheme here. In fact, we were trying to get back to the original status, and that predated that particular erosion from that problem. So I think there's only one other thing I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, if I, just so the evidentiary basis is there, I'd like to ask Mr. Gaynor one question, I promise, just one, and then I'll just maybe make a brief closing statement to sum everything up. So, Tom, you need to be sworn by Mr. Townsend.
I think we know your name and your address. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Or affirm that?
Yes.
Okay, and then, of course, one question, but if any of the members have questions, then they're certainly invited to ask.
So, Mr. Gaynor, when you first looked at the property, I believe that was 2016 before you purchased it, can you tell me and tell the board what the condition of the Brawlier property was when you first were looking at Great Oaks before you did any work?
It was a bog. It was a bog in the summer of 16 when we first put an offer on the property. We didn't close on the property until April of 2017. And from discussions with prior owners, including a fairly notable businessman who's got a business on the corner of 2nd and Baltimore Avenue, who previously owned the property, it was a bog 20 years ago when he owned it.
Okay, I have nothing further. I just wanted to make that clear.
Mr. Forston,
Yes.
so based on the comments you just made, were you asserting that the property line on the southeast of this property is the shoreline? Is that what you were just saying?
The southeast corner, not this, we're at the southwest corner here, right? So the southeast corner is further east, where the loblollies were that got taken down because they were falling into the lake. So you need to kind of go back that way. And there the property does extend to the lake itself. Here we end up, I think, just short of the lake. There's a little bit of ground between us and the lake on the southwestern corner where this retaining wall is.
But is it your testimony that if that any chain or no trespassing sign that was placed that was on your client's property and not
Yes.
on city property?
It is on my client's property, not the city property. And it was done, I think, even before this unfortunate incident in January of 2021, because, you know, when you're sitting out on your porch and suddenly people are walking by, I think they just wanted to stop that. But I'm speculating. I just know it was there before this happened.
All right. I think that's it for the evidentiary part of the hearing. So now we have to decide.
Well, can I just maybe just sum up? No?
Okay, you want to sum up? Go ahead.
Look, I wrote down a closing I'd like to make it. I'm going to say a lot of things you know already, and that is that quick check, which looks at four things: the nature of the zone in which the property lies, the character of the vicinity, the effect of the variance on other properties if granted, and the effect of not granting the variance on the property owner. And I think all of those factors weigh in favor of granting the variance. The first two are kind of, I think, we don't need to focus on. It's a residential property, it's a retaining wall, the immediate vicinity. This is not going to have any repercussions for the immediate vicinity. And as I think the pictures that I presented to you demonstrate, until you're basically right at the property or very close to the property, you'll never even see the riprap, which we're going to replace the wood, the riprap that will be there. If this variance is not granted, then as Mr. Metzner testified, you will see erosion of this soil, which is not compact anymore, into and towards the lake, which obviously will cause difficulty for Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Linehan. I also think this is kind of one of those variances and one of those situations that, quite frankly, is a win-win, because by preventing erosion on their property, you're also benefiting the lake, because you're not having that sediment and that muck, or I forget the word that Tim used now, but you're not having that flow into the lake, and that's what I think really matters here. We were here before, and at your all's suggestion and prodding, rather than just ask for our variance, you asked us if we could find a way to solve the problem more globally. We did that. And that process is now underway. And so I think that was a good thing, that suggestion that you made, because I think long-term it will benefit the city and benefit the property owners in the area. And the final observation I'll make is simply that the city does not actually oppose this. And so we appreciate that on the part of the city. And we will now sit tight and listen to you.
I'm going to take the prerogative as chair to open the case again. I just have a couple more questions to ask, okay? Thank you for, Mr. Janis, let me ask you a couple of questions. This particular zone includes the largest residential properties in the city. Would you agree with that?
It does.
And there's no other zone that has a 50-foot rear yard setback, is there?
Correct.
And if you know, can you tell me whether the properties that in this zone that back onto Lake Girard, can you tell me whether in that 50-foot setback, whether there is a slope that leads down to the lake for those properties?
I would assume so. I can certainly take a look at Google Maps and do my best judgment. But without access to the property, I wouldn't be able to speak truthfully on it.
For your client, or for you, I'll let you handle this first. They have a fence.
Correct.
Fence doesn't sit on the property line.
No, the fence is well short of the property line.
Right, maybe 20, 30 feet,
Oh,
maybe more.
the retaining wall itself, we know, is back from the property line. So probably 30, 40 feet maybe, but,
Why doesn't the fence go down further?
well, I think right now the fence, it's a straight fence kind of along the rear property line. So if you wanted it to follow the property line, it's a little contorted. And also, as you pointed out, I mean, the topography starts sloping down towards the lake at certain points. And so you'd have a fence that would kind of be running in a regular pattern up and down.
But your clients have a fenced-in backyard.
Correct.
And what we're talking about today is a piece of land that is outside their fenced-in backyard.
Correct.
It would seem to me that the part of their property that's getting used is the property inside the fence.
Correct.
And madam, it's not your turn. Not the property outside the fence.
Well, I think they use that to access the park, and if you're going to the city, that's certainly shorter than going out Oedy Oak Avenue and up to 3rd Street and down. So I wouldn't say it's not used at all. And as I think I mentioned, part of the plan here, ultimately longer term, is to put the trees in this area. So, you know, in order to plant those trees, we need there to be soil.
Okay. Would you agree with me that your client's property measures about 1¼ acres in size?
I'd have to look on the survey. It sounds about right.
Excuse me? Yes, you agree?
1 even.
1 acre. And would you agree with me that the lowest part of their property is where their property meets the corner of Mr. Brulier's property and the city property? Yeah, and that's a yes from your client?
Yes. And by the way, I found the survey that shows the wall, and it says the total area of the property is 1.03 acres.
Okay. So what we're talking about here is the lowest point on your property, the city property, and Mr. Brulier's property, for the most part. Yeah, go ahead.
So no.
No?
Actually, we're not. Because the lowest point on my property is the water mitigation pond.
The hole
that I
that
had
he
to
dug.
dig. No, the water mitigation pond that I had to dig and insert within my property boundary, within my fence boundary, at the bottom of my slope. The lowest point of my ground is well within my space, probably about another 50 feet before you get to that area. That's the subject area.
Right, you know, I seem to recall from our last meeting, you testified that you put the water mitigation
Correct.
on there.
My water, my problem.
And you told me that, you told us that it frequently fills up with standing water.
Correct.
And
Heavy storms. Yeah.
And you told us that from time to time, you have to replace the sod because the water kills the grass.
Correct.
And that area of your yard would be between the pool house and this corner of the yard in question.
Right.
So if somebody wanted to leave your yard to walk to the city at night, they'd have to go through this swale, not a swale, this water retention area, or somehow know that it was there or walk around it. It's a boggy area, it sounds like.
So in answer to your question, it looks like a sand trap, right? And you would just walk around it. And there's a walking area around the sand trap within my planting beds that is obvious, so nobody trips, over that area. And it was designed at Mr. Molina's direction when we first submitted the plans for the water mitigation control based on the construction that we did.
Thank you. All right, I don't have any other questions. Now, if that raises any further questions, go ahead. All right, now I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to give you what I'm going to think out loud, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to react to my thoughts out loud. And let's talk quick check. All right, so the first criteria is the nature of the zone where the property lies, right? And you told us that you thought this works in your favor, right?
Correct. Yep.
All right. Now, this is a very unique zone, the RS1. It's residential, no doubt about it, but it's large and it backs onto the lake. It consists of an enclave of just, a few houses, about half of them back onto the lake. And it's got slope, the houses that back onto the lake slope down to the lake. Whereas we look around the rest of Rehoboth, everything else is flat. So therefore, this is a unique aspect of this particular zone because water from these properties has to flow downhill into the lake.
Yes.
My thought is that a 50-foot setback serves to protect the character and nature of the lake by allowing undisturbed runoff to occur. Therefore, I think that consideration of the nature of the zone, big lots backing onto the lake, most of which are in their natural state within a 50-foot setback, wouldn't we be, if we were to grant this variance, wouldn't we be going against the nature of this particular unusual zone?
So the answer, I believe, is no, and here's why. We didn't have this retaining wall 3 years ago, right? We actually didn't have this retaining wall 2 years ago in 2020. We didn't have this retaining wall, 18 months ago, I guess, would have been when that pit was dug. And so up until the erosion problem started, didn't have it, didn't need it. But now there's a problem. And that problem doesn't go away simply because Mr. Barlier is now going to do that channel project that we talked about. Because that dirt is not the compact, hard dirt that wasn't eroding. Now it's kind of loose and fluffy, and it's all headed towards the lake, absent a retaining wall. So that's why I said at the conclusion, or near the conclusion of my remarks, that this is kind of one of those win-win situations. I think this benefits the property owner because he does use this portion of his property. And he's not now going to suffer erosion there, but it also benefits the lake because you're not having that silt and that other material run into the lake. And that's what's going to happen. That's what Tim Metzner testified to. If there's nothing there. So I think that actually, rather than going against the grant of the variance, I think that this is important for the grant of the variance. It supports the variance.
Second criteria is that we must consider the character and use of the immediate vicinity. And so isn't the immediate vicinity here the nature of that section of the land there, the intersection of all those properties where we have non-jurisdictional marshland? Aren't we changing the character of the property from marshland to terra firma by creating this wall, filling it in, and growing grass on it? Wouldn't I be correct in saying this property went from, this particular immediate section of the property went from marshland to terra firma?
Again, I would say no, because remember, the only reason the wall was built was to stop the erosion. So there would, if this had just been marshland and it was swampy and wet anyway, there wouldn't be a wall there because there wouldn't have been any change. The water from Brawleyer's pit would have just been flowing into marshland. Who cares? That's not what was happening. That's not why Mr. Gaynor and Mr. Linehan rushed to stop this erosion. It was taking soil away. It was taking terra firma, as you just put it, away. So they put this wall up to stop that.
Skip the third factor. Let's go to the last one. The last factor we must consider is whether denying the variance would create an exceptional practical difficulty in relation to their efforts to make normal improvements to the property. This particular improvement stands outside their fenced area and interferes with the natural grade of the area properties which drain into the lake. Wouldn't you agree with that?
No.
How so? How do you?
Because you're still going to drain into the lake. I mean, it's not perfectly level and perfectly flat so that water's going to hit it and just sit there. Although if it seeps in, that's fine. I mean, you always want there to be drainage into soil. There's been no evidence to suggest that this is going to have any adverse impact on drainage. And as we've said, and as you heard Mr. Metzner say, absent this retaining wall, there's going to be further erosion into the lake, more sediment, more silt into the lake. In other words, the dirt that's there is getting washed away. And that's why this was put in place. So we're not trying to do something, I mean, again, if that pit had never been dug, we wouldn't be here today, right? Because there wouldn't have been all that erosion, there wouldn't have been the need for the wall. But that pit was dug, it did cause erosion. And even with the new channel, if you will, from the Brawley property across the city park down into the lake, there's still going to be a need for a retaining wall because that dirt that's there now is not settled, it's not compact, and it's not ready. But we wouldn't be here today but for that problem. But I think it's unfair to say that this denial of this variance isn't going to have an effect on the property owner. I mean, he does use this property. Apparently, so do other city residents who walk completely around the lake.
I'm shocked.
You know, I think we do need this. And I think if this goes away and now this just all silts into the lake, that's more of a problem that we ought to be trying to avoid.
I want to thank you for addressing my concerns. Okay.
Well, I hope I have.
Well, we'll find out soon enough. All right, so now we're done with the evidentiary part of the hearing, so we have to make a decision. Anybody want to, you've heard some of my thoughts. Barry?
Well, some additional thoughts. Just a lighthearted look is, you have a no trespassing sign, but somebody is mowing the lawn up to that no trespassing sign, so you're inviting people up to that gate. But anyway, that's just an observation from the park. No, it's just the city, I don't know. What's been bothering me here, well, two issues, and if you will allow me, I can make a motion here, is I don't see the ongoing need for this mitigation, be it a riprap, be it a wall. It's certainly boggy. It has been stated it's been boggy for probably 50 or more years. But there's no excess flow. I don't see the erosion. And I would agree with you that I don't think your property is causing the problems in Lake Gerard. That's a whole separate low, low oxygen level. You guys are not causing that. Yeah. Anyone would say that was, I would argue that that's a bigger issue for the city to address. But the area does appear to be dry. I'm going, may I make a motion? Sure. Yeah, I've went through this and looked at these, and I have to say, usually when I do quick check items, I usually catch one that, makes me do a denial, but I'm of the belief of we have failed all 4 quick check items. I do not believe a riprap wall belongs in a residential area. Quick check item number 1, the nature of the zone. The nature and uses of the immediate vicinity. This is regarding number 2 and to number 3 quick check items. In the park, there is a playground, and there is a swing set right there. And, my view of riprap, it's not, good for children. So I do have concerns that a riprap wall is the wrong direction to go. So I don't think we pass items number 2 or number 3. And as far as, number 4, I still do not see an unnecessary hardship. I understand that the property owner has a right to have the gate, to have the light, to have a path, to use that and access the city, the city park. But I don't see, and I would believe that the renters and the owners use that as a shortcut into the city. That's perfectly fine. But I don't see, where we would approve this. We are hurting them. There is an exceptional practical difficulty or hardship. So I don't see in favor of any of the 4 quick check items. So I'm going to make a motion to deny, I'm going to state it, the riprap wall and also, the retaining of the wall, the wooden wall. So I'm going to recommend that that also be removed and returned to the natural state.
Just one observation real quick. There's going to be riprap under the plan to alleviate the stormwater, and that's actually on the parkland. Understand that, that channel goes across the parkland, and then there's riprap there. Our riprap is away from that.
I know. And if the city were to ask me, come to the board, I would vote no to riprap. I do think it's a safety issue for children.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Jan?
I'm going to vote no with Barry for the same.
So, well, you're going to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to vote no for the same reasons that Barry stated. Oh, sorry, I'll second it. That's what you want me to do?
Yeah.
All right, sorry. Got to be more specific, Jerry. It's late.
Walt, do you have any thoughts about this?
There's been a really long one, for months, but I would have to agree with Barry on this, looking at it, and I didn't even think about the fight with the kids in the playground there.
Okay, so the motion is made and seconded. Jan, do you want to give your reasons in support of, well, let's vote first. We'll start with Barry.
Well, could I say one thing about that? The playground, as I understand it, is not on the applicant's property,
That is
nor
correct,
is the riprap that they're proposing is not going to be on the playground. It's on their.
Understood.
Okay, so I would hope that that's not a significant part of the justification for denying the application.
My concern is children will be in a playground. There is no fence. It's a riprap right into a lake. I would be concerned of that. And again, that's one of my 4 reasons for making the motion.
Jan?
I'm going to vote with Barry on this one. I'm going to vote no. I think this is not the way to go to solve the problem. And some of these problems seem to be self-induced. Do we say anything else? Or?
You-
Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
And my vote, right?
I got your vote.
No, I didn't vote yet.
Okay, you didn't vote yet?
No.
What's your vote?
And my vote is to uphold the motion, and I really wish that the city and the homeowner could come up with a better solution than a riprap wall, riprap chute wall.
So, but you also expressed on the record your opposition to the wooden wall as well.
That is correct.
Because you're aware that it was through the applicant's efforts to accommodate the desires of the city that the proposal changed from being the present wall to a riprap wall.
That is correct. Right.
Well,
I'm going to say no for the same reasons.
I think the unique nature of this zone is a factor in this case. I think that 50-foot setback is there for a reason. The property's drained down to the lake. The photographs show that. I think that a placement of the retaining wall in this location interferes with the nature of the zone at that part of the zone, which is a wetlands area. It may not be a jurisdictional wetlands, but what the applicant has done is reclaimed wetlands and made them terra firma. So that's a change in the nature of the property itself. So I think that they failed to meet the first criteria and the second criteria. As far as the third criteria, I think could go either way. I appreciate what Barry's had to say, but I think that this problem didn't exist until fairly recently. I can't say for I think that there may be a combination of factors that caused this problem to arise, and I think that by placing the retaining wall where they did, they forced other property owners, the city and Mr. Berlier, to solve the problem for themselves, and they have diverted the runoff from uphill onto other properties. The last factor we must consider is whether it would create an exceptional practical difficulty for the applicants in relation to the making normal improvements to the property. I'm inclined to think that the retaining wall they've installed here is not a normal improvement. It stands outside their fenced-in rear yard and interferes with the natural grade of the area properties draining into the lake. This retaining wall is at the furthest point of the backyard away from the house. They put it there to divert the flow of water which was coming off Mr. Berlier's yard into the wetland area of their property as it headed into the lake. Therefore, I don't think it should be considered a normal improvement to their property based on the unique characteristics of this zone and the location of the retaining wall on the property and the marshland characteristics of this section of the property. Therefore, I'm going to vote against this application as well. So the votes four votes opposed to deny this variance request. Does that conclude our business today? Any other business, Madam Clerk? No. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.